here. This is like my second time preaching up here, so I look forward to sharing some of the stories about my work over the next 2 hours that I have. I have 2 hours, right? So no, just kidding. So as he mentioned, I'm a director of engineering at Google. I've got about 30 years of experience working in Silicon Valley in software engineering, both as an individual contributor and as a manager, and most recently over the last several years as a director. I attended Pastor Rich's alma mater many years ago, but unlike Pastor Rich, I did not go into ministry. I went into engineering, and so that's how I ended up sort of on the path that I went into. I play the piano sometimes over there. I love it a lot. I feel like my style of piano playing is really opening myself up to the Holy Spirit and seeing what God can do through me. And so I don't know, I can't read music, so I don't know how to really read sheet music, but I understand what chords are, and I just feel the music, and I feel the notes, and I feel the Holy Spirit work through me when I play, so that's awesome. My wife cannot be here, unfortunately, today. Her aunt is sadly dying of brain cancer, and so she had to fly down this weekend to say goodbye along with her sisters and her dad. So it was a last-minute shocking thing that we just found out about. And my girls can't be here because they slept too late and they weren't ready to go when it was time for me to come in here. So I'm going to shame them. They're watching me on the live stream, so this is, you could have been here, but you aren't. But it's okay. I know that you're watching anyway. So, and I also have 2 amazing cats, which leads us to our next slide. I want to show you our cats. I noticed that, when Pastor Rich would preach, he would always put pictures of his grandchild up here, so I figure I can put pictures of our cats up here. The big gray fluffy one is Meowser, and the the darker black tabby is Yarrow. I heard somewhere that everyone who has 2 cats has the same 2 cats. One that's just the sweetest, kindest, nicest cat, and one that's a complete, just a ball of chaos and causes trouble and everything, and that's the cat on the right, Yarrow, is the mischievous one. He's the one that gets into everything and gets himself stuck into cabinets and hides inside of desks when you're not looking, and you pull out a drawer and there's a cat in there. That's Yarrow. So that's a bit about me, and now I want to sort of switch gears. I want to talk a little bit, if we can go to the next slide. I want to talk about first I'm just going to cover a series of different Bible verses in the book of James. We've been going through James in this series. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some stories about me and my work and some of the things that I've experienced, and how some of these values that we can get from these verses in James kind of, I put them into action and sort of the way that I work in my career. So let's start with James 4, verses 1-3. This is from the NIV translation. So if you have a different one, it might be a little bit different. I'm going to read it off my phone because it's a little hard to read from the screen back there. James 4, verses 1-3. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. All right, next slide. I'm going to come back to those verses and some thoughts about that. But first I'm going to tell a story about how I became a manager at Google, because that's kind of an interesting story, and I think it kind of sort of shows how some of these quarrels among people kind of show up in the workplace. Next slide. So when I was, after I worked for a mid-sized company for about 8 years, and I worked for a startup for another 8 years. And then my sister got a job at Google and said, hey, you got to come work at Google. It's a great place to work. This is around 2011. And I was really nervous. I didn't feel like I potentially could hang at Google. I felt like, these are some of the smartest people in the world. They had a reputation for hiring a lot of PhDs, and I didn't even have a master's degree. I just had a bachelor's degree. But I went ahead and interviewed, and I got a job offer to work in a division of Google called Google Apps, which at the time did things like Gmail. They did, like Calendar and things like that. And so I was really excited. And the team I was hired to work on was called Google Voice, which makes a phone service that runs in the cloud. And just before Google hired me, my company, we'd just migrated to Gmail, and we were sad that we couldn't migrate our phone system over to something that Google ran, because running your own phone system, if you've ever run a small business, running your own phone system is kind of a pain in the butt, especially if you have like a receptionist and like extensions and stuff. You have to buy a bunch of equipment and like wire up a bunch of phones and maintain them. It's kind of a hassle. And every time there's a holiday, you got to like go reprogram the things to say we're closed on Thursday for Thanksgiving. So when I was interviewing at Google, I was really excited to work on this business version they were talking to me about developing of Google Voice. It would be exactly the product I wish we had had when we moved to Gmail. So it was really exciting. I was like, this is a product I believe in. It's a product I want to work on. And so I joined Google. I took the job offer to join Google Apps. Next slide. But after I took the job offer and before I started, they did a big reorg and they pulled Google Voice out of Google Apps and they moved it to another org, next slide, which was Google+. It was this brand new social network that was being created, and they'd pulled like other products into this org as well. One of the most famous ones that got moved in here was a product called Google Reader. And if any of you are techies who know the story of Google Reader, you'll know it didn't end up so great for Google Reader. What ended up happening was the leader of this new org, Google+, he had been given a tremendous amount of power. And the attitude at the time at Google was, okay, Facebook is this big social network. It's going to take over the world. And so we have to compete in social. And so they gave this senior vice president, his name was Vic Gandotra, they gave him kind of a blank check to do whatever he wanted. And so he created this really big org, and he was moving teams in from all over the company, and he was given a lot of power. And during that time, you could see a lot of infighting at Google. You could see a lot of leaders sort of fighting politically for ownership of this or that, and trying to get as many people as they could, and getting ownership of different projects. And so one of the things that we saw was that a lot of projects like Google Voice, like Google Reader, they were increasingly being asked, can you help Google+, or how can your engineers help Google+? And they would pull people off those projects and stick them on Google+. And so by the time Google Reader got canceled, I think there was only like one person working full time on it. And then they just canceled the product entirely, which caused a big uproar in the community. On my team, on Google Voice, 2 weeks after I started, because of this reorg, they canceled the Google Voice for Work product, which was the product I joined Google to work on. And they immediately said, hey, how can you help Google Voice help Google+? And I was like, I don't know, like a social network, and we create a phone service, and you are running a Facebook. Like, those aren't really connected. So, but I was just an individual contributor on the team. I was just one of many people on the team. And over the next year and a half, as this political fighting continued, a couple of things happened. There was a big press moment where Google+ was doing a big announcement, and they were excited for all the publicity they were going to get. And Google Voice, the team I was on, my boss had decided to launch this feature, and he didn't realize it was launching at the same time. And so they launched this small feature for Google Voice. And one of the things about that Google Voice product was that even though it's a really small product with like a relatively small user base, it has a very passionate fan following, including a lot of journalists. And so what ended up happening was the press coverage for that little feature in Google Voice was bigger than the press coverage for the Google+ thing that got announced. And the SVP was furious. He was like, how dare you steal our thunder with this little thing that you did? Like, I don't even know what you guys are doing. And so from that point on, this is about maybe, I want to say it's like 6 to 9 months after I started, he said, I need to review everything you launch before you launch it. And every time we got ready to launch something, he would just prevent it from launching. He would just say, you can't launch this. And we'd say, why? And he's like, I just don't think that now is the time. And so what would happen as he did that is people would start to quit the team. And they would leave to go work on other things. They're like, what am I doing here? They'd spend 3 months building something. They'd get to the point where they were about to ship it, and then the SVP would choose not to launch it, and then they would just wasted their time. They'd sacrifice their career momentum, and so they would just leave. And as those people left, instead of backfilling those people back onto our team, he would then backfill them onto Google+ to grow the size of that team and grow his empire there. And so the team started to shrink. And this went on for about a year and I want to say like almost a year and a half that I was on the team. And at a certain point, the leadership on my own team, they were trying to build Google Voice into something bigger. They went to senior leadership. They went around our SVP and they said, hey, we want our team moved. We don't want to be here anymore. Please put us somewhere else. And senior leadership said, well, we agree with what you're saying, but we would need Vic to agree to do that. And they took it to Vic, and Vic's like, heck no, like I like having this team under me, even though I'm not letting them launch anything. and so at that point, there was like the conflicts had boiled up to a kind of a big moment. So by now, like when I joined the team, there was maybe 28 people working on a team. By this point, there's about, I want to say there's like maybe 17 people left. So we had like 10 people quit. And my boss took me aside and he said, hey, I'm going to switch teams at Google. I'm going to go work on something else because this isn't working out for me. And like, there's obviously a lot of conflict. I've kind of burned my bridges here. Leadership doesn't like my approach, and they didn't like that I tried to get this project moved. And so I'd like you to take over managing the team. And at the time, I had never managed a team before, but I had been working on a project with another team up in Kirkland that was slightly aligned with Google+. It was called Google+ Hangouts. And so it was a communications product, so we're trying to figure out if there's maybe some ways I could help them out. So he said, you've got a good relationship with at least one Google+ team, so like, I think maybe you could manage a team. And I'm thinking to myself, well, even though I don't have experience managing, we have the product manager of Google Voice. He was the co-founder of this company we had bought that Google Voice had come from. So I was thinking, okay, I can rely on that product manager to really be the real lead of the team. He's basically he was the co-founder of this other company. And we had a number of senior people on the team, including a front-end tech lead and a bunch of other folks. So I felt like, okay, I can kind of make sure that the ship, keeps going in the right direction. I can keep the train on the rails, so to speak. And so I said yes. And a week later, we're in the team meeting, and my boss he gets up and announces he's leaving, and I'm going to be stepping in to take over as manager. And then the product manager steps up and announces he's leaving. And then our front-end tech lead announces he's leaving, and then 2 more senior leads on the team announce are leaving. In the end, there were only 11 people and me left on the team. I didn't have a front-end tech lead. I didn't have anyone working on front-end at all. I would joke when people come and ask for bug fixes for the voice.google.com website. I'm like, I have these 3 empty desks. There's nobody in them, so no one can fix the bug right now. We have to hire these people because we literally have nobody to work on this. So I was completely unprepared. Let's move to the next slide. So anyway, that's how I became a manager. I had no idea what I was doing. And all this conflict that had happened, all of this political fighting and people fighting for ownership of different things had resulted in basically this org completely falling apart and everybody quitting. And I sort of like ended up responsible for this thing that was about to die. Next slide. So quarrels come from selfish desires. So in James, when we're thinking about James, right, it's this letter that James is writing to these early Christians, and they're facing a lot of social and economic hardship. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of fighting, and they were fighting amongst themselves and in their community. There's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of people focused on their own personal, trying to enrich themselves, and that was leading to a lot of quarrels. And the reason I was thinking about this sort of point in my career at Google was that I saw a lot of the same thing happen there. In a lot of big companies, people are very ambitious, they're motivated, and there's this theme of empire building that happens, where people are trying to build the biggest org or build the largest amount of ownership over things, and those conflicts, a lot of conflicts can arise from people's selfish desires. Next slide. So when we measure our success on what the world gives us, we are drawn into conflict. My bosses, they wanted this Google Voice product they were on, my direct bosses, they wanted that product to be really big and successful and have lots and lots of users. They wanted to be, the next Google Calendar or the next Google, Docs or Gmail or whatever. And meanwhile, on the other side, their VP wanted Google Plus to be the biggest thing since Facebook. He wanted it to be a big social network. And so everyone wanted their own personal success, and that caused a lot of fighting, and it caused a lot of conflict. And that happens in other areas of our lives. If we think about all the different places where we are competing with other people or thinking about, like, how do we enrich ourselves? Like, we see this in the way that people, fight over money or fight over financial decisions. We see it over how people decide on political things. I'm not going to get into politics, but, how do people think about housing, how people think about many aspects of lives. As people focus on what's best for them, it can create a lot of conflict, and that's something that is not new. It's something that's fundamentally human, and James saw that back in these biblical times as well. So next section. So let's talk about verses 10 to 12. I'm just going to read these. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister judges them, speaks against the law, and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There's only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? All right, so when we last left off, I'm a manager, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, my team is in disarray, I've got a bunch of empty desks, things are really rough. Next slide. So, I needed to turn things around, and I needed to approach the way that I approached my job in a different way than the previous leaders had, right? Like, so I got into this state because the leaders before, they were focused on their own personal ambition, they were focused on the traditional measures of success, being, having your name associated with something that's really big, being in charge of some, being the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next, I don't know what the equivalent of Gmail is because no one really knows who that guy is, but you know what I mean? Like, having your name attached with some big product that you're the big person behind. And that conflict that resulted from that ambition and people fighting over it just resulted in the team coming apart. So that wasn't a strategy I could continue to use. Next slide. So I took a different approach. I looked at my team and I said, let's not make this about us. Like, let's not make it about what I can do or what our team is or like our own product by itself. Let's see where we can help other teams with the stuff that we have. Like, we have a lot of skills and a lot of strengths, but rather than say, let's just build our own thing and try to make that successful, where are there other teams that are building things that could benefit from our expertise? It could benefit from the special sauce of, say, phone stuff that we know or telecommunication stuff that we were working on. And so in that process, next slide, I ran into this guy who was starting a crazy ambitious project. It was super iffy at Google. It was codenamed Project Nova that eventually became Google Fi Wireless. He wanted to make a phone company inside of Google. And they didn't even know what they were going to do with it exactly. What they believed was that, and just some background on this, for Google, they wanted to make sure that phones and Android continue to be really easily available to people, and they wanted to apply a little pressure on the industry to make sure that people felt like they had a need to compete and innovate, and they didn't want the things to stagnate and people just one day be paying $150 a month for phone service and feel like that's too expensive. So they wanted to be in there not so much to win the market, but really just to create a certain amount of competitive pressure so that everybody else would step up their game a little bit. And so I started meeting with the team and I said, hey, look, we've got this Google Voice product. We do this phone stuff. We have a lot of expertise that could be helpful here. So how could we help you? And so we sat down, and I remember talking to the head at the time was this guy named Nick Fox, who currently leads search over at Google. And Nick and his team, we were coming up with these very strange ideas of what Google Fi could do that no carrier had done before. One of these ideas was that it would run on more than one carrier network. And so they would sign deals with competing carrier networks, and it would run on all of them, and depending on where you were, you would get a good signal, which was kind of nuts. If any of you remember the old Verizon ads, it was can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? The carriers would advertise based on okay, we have the best coverage here, or we have the best coverage there, and we were we're just going to make it work on more than one, so if it doesn't work well on this carrier, we'll just switch to the other one, and you always get good coverage. And it was a very disruptive idea and kind of nuts. And we were able to use the technology that my team had to help create that abstraction layer that allowed Google Fi Wireless to be built. So in the end, Google Fi Wireless ended up being built almost entirely on top of Google Voice. And I remember then they did a big presentation for the whole company. We had this internal thing called TGIF, and so everyone was up there on stage for Google Fi presenting it, and it was this really remarkable moment. But I remember my team being sad because at the end of the presentation, they barely mentioned that they were built on top of our stuff. And so my team had spent all this time working on it, but no one knew that we had done it. But at the end of the day, it was still really valuable. It kept our team alive. It gave us impactful, important work to do, and it kept us employed, and it helped us build something bigger. Next slide. And so that became my focus for the team, is looking out not just for teams like that, but across the whole company. Where can we help other teams? And even though we didn't get a lot of visibility for the work that we did for Google Fi Wireless, I'm still really proud of that, because at the end of the day, lots of people got promoted. Lots of people were successful in their career. We built a wireless carrier that's still around, still doing very well. It's super cheap. It's really good for people who have like a sort of a limited budget, and it's really good for people who have to travel internationally. Like, so if you go back home to another country or something like that regularly, it works in a bunch of countries, and it basically costs the same. So it's a really good product that I think helps a lot of people. And even though in that moment, it's not like I got a lot of recognition or my team got a lot of recognition, I think that the fact that we were able to help other teams allowed us to be successful. And it was a different way of working. You know, it's not about trying to build the biggest team we could or, you know, make the most money ourselves. It was really about helping other teams create things that would help their users. And I think in the end, what ended up arising from that was this new system at Google called Google Telephony Platform, which is effectively an infrastructure team that powers all the phone stuff at Google now. And that's actually what I work on today. We power 50 different teams at Google. We power everything. If you're in a Waymo vehicle and you need help and you press that button, that goes through the same team. That goes through this team I was just talking about. If you have a Fitbit kid's smartwatch and the kid needs to call their parents, that goes through this team. So we power lots of stuff beyond Google Voice now. And it's really, no one knows who we are. No one knows what we do. Even at Google, no one knows what we do. Even within my own org, when people find out we're in their org, they're like, why are you in our org? What do you have to, like, we're in this org called Core Data, which powers like search and things at Google. And they're like, why are you guys in here? Like, you know, we don't think it's bad that you're here, but we just don't know why you're here. No one knows why we're anywhere at Google. But the good thing is that we're able to help, and, you know, we've been able to be successful, and our approach to doing that has been rooted in humility, right? It's been rooted in how do we help other people be successful in what they're doing? How do we take the strengths that we have and help others? Where are the places where we can make a difference? Not because we're trying to achieve a lot of glory for ourselves to become this famous team that everybody knows about. In fact, like, mostly we fly under the radar, but instead we're focused further out. We're focused on where we can help others. And I think if more people, and as you do your work, you think about that a little bit further out, I think you can make more of a difference. I'm going to tell another story. I didn't put this in the slide deck, but I tell this a lot at work. Before I worked at Google, I worked at this small company called Cyforma that made project management software. And so we make software that would figure out, like, you know, how many days left to get this task complete, when's the next thing due, like how are we doing on this project, when is it going to be complete? And I remember we had this one customer. It was called Teva Pharmaceuticals. They're based out of Israel. And they were an incredibly difficult customer because they had very specific requirements about how they wanted to track all of the work that their teams did and the people did. And they didn't track tasks the same way. They didn't track their projects the same way. And so I effectively had to build a completely custom feature set for them just for this one customer, which if any of you worked in software, that's not something you normally want to do. You don't normally want to make like a version of your software that's just for one customer. But this was such an important customer of ours, they were such a big customer of ours, it was worth it for us to do that. And so I spent months and months building, and then they would come back and say, we changed our mind, we want it to work this way. And so I'd have to like go and redo it. So it was just a complete pain in the butt customer. And I remember being really frustrated with them. And then one night, this is when Naomi, our older daughter, she was just a baby. She had gotten sick. She got an ear infection. And so I'm up late at night because it's my turn to give her the antibiotics. And I'm pulling the antibiotics out of the fridge, and I'm shaking the bottle because that's the way it is for babies. And I'm getting it ready, and I'm looking at the bottle of antibiotics, and I see it's manufactured by Teva Pharmaceuticals. This antibiotic I'm giving my daughter is the same company that's been this pain in the butt. And I'm realizing, I'm like, whoa, okay. It's easy to think, okay, this is just my job, and I'm just doing this thing, it's just for making money for somebody. But I'm helping this company do its mission, and its mission is to make medicine, and I need that medicine for my baby. And so in my indirect way, I'm helping them achieve something that also helps me, and it helps my daughter. And a lot of the work we do is like that. A lot of the work that you do, if you work at a grocery store, you know, there are places in America that are called food deserts, where there's just no local grocery store. And so people, like, their choice of food is really limited. Maybe they can just get like Twinkies and like, you know, 7-Up or something. They can't get fresh food. And so because it isn't possible to run a grocery store there. And so if you work at a grocery store, you are helping that part of your community not be a food desert. And that can mean like better health for the people who live around you, and it means cheaper food options for people who can cook for themselves and don't have to pay to go out to eat. There's a lot of benefits from each of the jobs that we do that go far beyond what we see on the surface. And I hope that each of you, whatever you do, when you think about the work that you do, you think beyond just the day-to-day of I go to work and I do this job and I make money. But think about God is using you to do some greater impact in the world. God is using you to do something beyond what you just see on the surface. If you're teaching somebody, you might be changing someone's life in the future that's going to go on to do incredible things for God and for God's kingdom. And so the work that we do has a lot more of a ripple effect than you can see on the surface, and it's all by just sort of recognizing that God will use us in ways that we can't understand ourselves, in indirect ways that go beyond our own understanding. All right, next slide. So, humility means acknowledging God is in control, not us. So thinking back about those verses. And I realize now maybe I should have put the verses right before I put these so that we could tie it back together. But thinking about those verses in James where, really the focus of those verses in James is about how we need to trust God to be in control, and that we need to realize that God is making these things, it's not up to us. Next slide. So we have to rely on God and trust him to accomplish things through us and with us. This isn't something that we will accomplish on our own. And something as we work, as I lead in my job at Google, I make sure that I'm a servant leader, that I think about how do I help my teams be successful? How do I help the people on my team make an impact? And then beyond that, how do I ensure my team helps other teams be successful and help those teams help ultimately users and customers of products at Google? We have a lot of people use Google Voice for a free phone number because they can't afford it. One of the product offerings that Google Voice has is this, they have a voicemail number that they give out to people who are unhoused. So that if you don't have a situation where you can get a phone, maybe you can't even charge a phone because you're at the very roughest end of being unhoused, where you don't even have regular access to a power outlet. We have this thing called Project Care, and you can get a phone number, and people can leave you messages there. And when you can get to a phone somewhere, you can call in and check your messages and get messages. So there are a lot of good things that we're able to do indirectly by helping others. And so that's one of the things that I really like about my job, but also ultimately that's one of the things that, if we can set aside what we're focused on for our own ambition and instead think about helping others, there's a lot that God can do through us. Next slide. All right, for this last section, I'll talk a little bit about the future and uncertainty, because this is kind of a sort of important reminder from the book of James. These verses say, now listen, you say today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. So, next slide. So reorg fun. So for those who don't know what this meme is, it's this walrus who has a bucket, and it's like, I has a bucket, and then it's, no, they be taking my bucket. It kind of captures these moments where you have something and then it gets taken away. So one of the things that I learned working at Google is that there are constant reorgs. Now, even though I had told that story in the beginning about how people are ambitious and they sort of fight for ownership of things, even though I'd gotten through that initial phase, that never really ends. There's always people who want to own something or don't want to own something or want to switch something up and do something. So I've been at Google for 14 years. And in my 14 years, I've had 13 different managers. And I've been in 4 different divisions of Google, like large different parts of Google, not counting the apps org that I joined originally. Although I eventually got reorged into the apps org. So that was the 3rd of the 4th orgs I was in apps. I'm not in there anymore. I was in there for a few years. So I joke, if you just wait long enough, you'll eventually get to be in whatever org you want to be in. And so there's constant changes at Google. So at this time, after I sort of had created this team that created Google Telephony Platform, it was like this function at Google, and I was also doing Google Voice, there was another leader who was a little more senior than me. And he was ambitious, and he wanted to take over Google Telephony Platform. He wanted to run that. So he went to my boss and said, hey, I want to run this thing that Alex is doing. There's a little politics involved with it. Like, it was a little bit like, he's like, You have to choose one of us, and I think you should choose me, he said to my boss, because I'm more senior and I've got more experience. And so my boss was like, well, clearly I have to make a choice, so I guess I'll move the team under you. And I remember meeting with the manager after I'd been told that my team was going to be split up and he's going to take over the platform side. And I said to him, let me know how I can help. I'm here to help make sure this is as smooth as possible. I'm going to make sure this is really successful for the team and for you. And I remember him looking at me with shock. He said, I've done this before and I've never had anyone be nice about it like this. He's like, I've never had anyone approach me and say, hey, I'm going to help you be successful in this. Like, this is really weird. He was completely thrown. It was really strange. But it wasn't just lip service. I helped him be successful, helped him spin out the team. And we ended up building a good relationship, even though he had done this very political thing to take this thing over. Because at the end of the day, I'm like, the decision's made. I work at a company. I want to make sure the team is supported. I want to make sure our customers are supported. It's fine. I'll make it work. And in part because I was able to do a good job giving that team back. Eventually, at some point, they were like, this team needs a new owner. They thought of me again. They were like, oh, okay, we'll put this back under Alex because it had gone smoothly when I handed it off before. So that was kind of an interesting lesson to learn that instead of fighting over it, I was just like, cool, let me help you be successful with it. And it ended up working out better for me in the long run. But at the time, there was this other team that was working on this app that's part of Android. It's the phone dialing app in Android. So if you have an Android phone and there's this thing called phone on your, they were like, well, there's a phone in my phone. That phone in your phone is called the dialer. There's a team that builds that app. And similar to my story about Google Voice, they had gone through this period of everybody quitting the team. Because they had been reorged and the new leadership wasn't really sure how to use them, and they felt like kind of rudderless and lost, and so a lot of people were quitting. And so my boss took me aside and he said, hey, the dialer team needs a new manager. And when I looked at the team, I'm like, there's only 2 people on this team now out of 9. And the 2 people who are on the team have both been at Google for less than 6 months. And I realized that meant they couldn't quit. That's basically anyone who could have quit this team had quit it, and the only people who hadn't quit the team were so new they weren't able to. And so I'm like, okay, so you took away my platform team, and you're giving me this new challenge to turn around. But I was like, I got it. I'll help out. And I started talking to some people. There was another engineer who I had met working on Google Fi who was looking for something new. So I was able to bring some people over. And in 9 months, we ended up building a really great team. We built a team of about 11 people, and we were able to launch the first Pixel phone, which was and we redid the user interface. We changed how you answer the phone. It was controversial at the time because on the Nexus phones that Google had, you would answer the phone by swiping left or right, I forget which direction. And when we launched the Pixel, you answer the phone by swiping up. And it was huge, everyone was fighting over it, oh my God, I can't believe you could swipe up? How am I supposed to know that? I just swipe right out. It was it's so funny now because you don't think about those kind of things, but even small changes to products, people are like, oh my gosh, it was this earth-shattering change to swipe up to answer the phone. But it was a really good experience, and I just trusted in God. I remember going through both the reorg, when they split up my team. And it was a painful split. When we split up the platform team apart from the Google Voice team, I'd had people who had worked for me for so many years. There were tears in those meetings, which is not that common in a tech company for people to cry, grown men to cry in a meeting. But we had such a tight-knit team with so many people who had been there. Because there had been people on the team who'd gone through major health scares and changes. I mean, we were a team that really supported each other. And so getting split up like that, it was much more emotional than usual. And people were really upset. And so going through that, I remember praying a lot. And saying, God, just use me, help me be strong through this, help me figure out what to do, and it ultimately those challenges ended up being a good thing. It created, I was able to help another team be successful, and accomplish something that they couldn't do otherwise. What's the next slide? I forgot how many slides I put on reorg fun. So that was the one about the dialer team. So let's see the next slide. So then This is another funny thing. So when I told this story earlier, I worked on this thing called Voice for, I was trying to work on this Google Voice for Work product, right? This phone number that works, for small businesses. And it got canceled like 2 weeks after I started. There were a couple more opportunities I had when I was running Google Voice to get that project in front of leadership. And so I would talk to some team, we would put together a big proposal, we'd get different levels of leaders to approve it, and inevitably we'd get in front of a vice president who would look at it and be like, oh, this sounds really complicated and scary, we don't want to do it. And they would kill it. And everyone would go back to our day jobs just sad, because we're like, this is a really good product, we should make this. Like, don't know why we can't get leadership to do it. And it happened again and again and again. It happened like 4 times over 5 years. And finally, Diane Green, on her own, she was at the time running Google Cloud, she was like, we should have a phone product for businesses. Why don't we have this product? So she wanted to do it. And so they reached out and we started working again. And finally, we were able to get a leader, because we had Diane Green behind us, to okay it. And so because this project had been killed and came back so many times, the code name for this project is Project Wolverine. I don't know if any of you have seen Deadpool and Wolverine, but like that's why it's Wolverine. There you go, that's just the slide. And that product, actually we did launch it. It's called Voice for Workspace now. I don't get a cut if you sign up for it, so there's no referral code, but it's a good product. A lot of small businesses use it. We also have a lot of universities, healthcare organizations that use it. And so it was, one of the things I learned from that journey was that, sometimes the timing that you think things are going to happen isn't when you think it's going to happen. And God has his own sense of timing. And I see the good that we do from that product. I like that product because it makes money the old-fashioned way, right? Like, people think everything at Google makes money by selling your data to run ads or whatever. This service, it's just a phone service for businesses. It makes money by charging, a little more than it costs for us to run it, right? Like we basically charge like as little as $10 a month, but it can cost us like $7 a month to offer you the service. We don't sell any of your data, it's all private. And so I would tell people who were looking for different teams at Google, I'm like, if you come work for us, you'll be working on a very honest business. It's like we make a thing for cheaper than we sell it for, and we want to make it good enough that people want to pay for it. And a lot of people like working on stuff like that, so it was really good. Next slide. So, one of the things that I learned through that experience and through all these different reorgs, in fact, I went through another reorg later when they took the Google Voice team, they took all of us off the Google Voice project who were in the Bay Area, and they moved the whole project to the East Coast. And so all of us are now working on different things. It was another one of these big meetings where it was like, a lot of emotion. It's like there were people who had worked together at that point for over a decade on Google Voice, and they were all being split up onto different teams. We just don't know what the future has in store. I'm now working in core engineering. My new boss just gave me a second team to help for some limited amount of time, I think. I don't know, maybe she's gonna make it longer, maybe it's gonna be over in a month, but I've been helping a completely unrelated team who's also been struggling. So I don't know what God has in store for me. God knows, right? And that's what it is, the same for all of us. God knows what is in store for our future. We don't really know. And one of the things I've learned through this experience and how I work is I pray all the time. And I don't know what, going into a meeting, I do like a silent prayer in my head before I go into that meeting. Or in the beginning of the day, as I'm walking, a lot of times when I'm walking from the parking lot into the building in the morning, I'll just do a quick silent prayer in my head as I'm like walking through the sunlight. Because I always feel like when the sun is shining on you, you can sort of feel God's warmth, like his light on you in those moments. I always pray in those moments as I'm heading into the building, like, God, I don't know what you have in store for me today, but just be there for me and help me make good decisions and use me to do good things in the world. And so, humility is recognizing that our future is in God's hands, not ours. And then next slide. I thought there should have been a second bullet point, but I ended up not. I think that first one's good enough. So, but I still put a second one in there anyway. And so that's sort of like some of the things I learned. I have a lot more to learn and a lot more opportunities for God to use me in my work. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm excited for whatever it is. We're in a time of big change. I should have mentioned, by the way, some of those pictures with the cat and the islands, those were AI generated. I'm required to use AI in everything I do because I work at Google, so that's why those are AI generated. So also I figured if I asked my daughter to draw them, she would have complained the whole time. So.